Well, thank you, Sophie, for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here, and also in these privacy platforms. I think these are really the prime venues to further the discussion. I had prepared a presentation in my mind for 15 minutes, but I saw on the program I only have 10. So I will try to do only the first part and respond a bit already to some of the statements made by the previous speakers. This is, above all, a very momentous time. There will be a directive out there on cybersecurity, accompanied by an impact assessment, a communication by the Commission, which some of us have and some of us haven't seen. So it's a bit difficult to already sort of analyze that too much, but, which I won't do, but I will refer to it every now and then. So scientific research shows that you can only probably remember one or two key messages of what I'm going to say today. The first is consider an actor-based value chain approach when governing cybersecurity. That was the second part of my speech. But the first part, and I think already in the previous interventions we've had ample sort of material to discuss the second key message, which is to apprise constitutional values online in this concept of cybersecurity. So one of the main questions for today is, what is cybersecurity? And that is precisely what I wanted to address in the first part. So over the last years, we've seen a lot of frames entering the debate in these discussions on cybersecurity, and I wanted to address a couple of them. Today I will only discuss the first part. The frame, or sort of the dominant frame when discussing cybersecurity is one about threats. So that's very much sort of the cyber crime or the cyber war frame. We've already heard a lot about it. And the other dominant frame that we hear is on public-private partnerships. So that's two frames that I want to address. The cybercrime frame. So cybercrime, addressing cybersecurity as a cybercrime problem presents us with a couple of limitations. Of course, one of the sort of main goals of feeling secure online is, of course, that you're not subjected to crime. But I argue that cybercrime is more a byproduct of really bad security than anything else. It's not the root cause of cyber insecurity. And why is cybercrime such a difficult frame to address, or does it have its limitations? That's precisely because what Mr. Erting already told us is that we have the attribution problem on the internet. Susan Landau has written a beautiful paper on that. And on the internet, that's the problem. It's very difficult to know the actor and his intent. Whether it's a nation state committing a cyber war, an act of cyber war, or a cyber criminal after your in-log credentials. But what cybercrime really is, and we're talking about sort of the massive cybercrime sweeping acts that are online, is an economic problem. Cormac Hurley of Microsoft Research has written a beautiful paper on this. Where do all these attacks go? So, where do all the attacks go? Well, the majority of cyber attacks in the cybercrime space actually go to places not where sort of an individual is vulnerable, but where systems are really bad. So cybercrime is not really, there are very sort of economic drivers behind this. And the statement that you can remember from this paper, and the link is down there, is that many attacks cannot be made profitable, even when many profitable targets exist. So I and everybody here is a target, right? But the attacks are only becoming profitable and interesting for cyber criminals when system security is bad. So that is something that we should focus on, system security. The second frame that is often there in sort of cybersecurity debates is the public-private partnership love affair. So public authorities and private entities should come together and share information because we really have these shared interests. Now, as you all know, and everybody is a stakeholder in this debate, in this hall, every actor has its dark side. I mean, there's the superficial way of we present ourselves, you know, wearing the nice jacket, but behind this is another agenda. And this is very logical, and this has always been the case. Yesterday I attended a presentation by Professor Hogenboom in the Netherlands, and he presented some empirical research on public-private partnerships and the reporting of security incidents. And he said, sort of depending on the context, if you entrust the reporting of security incidents in a public-private partnership framework, only 40 to 85% of incidents go unreported. So while public-private partnerships are, of course, sort of dominant frame of today, it's not very sure that public-private partnerships are actually the most successful way of actually getting these systems secure. The other thing is, of course, where's the end user? So finally for today, and I'll leave you with this, is what I feel is very much lacking in this discussion. And that is a coherent view on what privacy actually entails and what cybersecurity is as a concept, and what the locality of privacy is within that framework. So, rooted in information theory, and there's a lot of brilliant work on this, notably also by Luciano Floridi, who is maybe here with us today, or at least he's Friday in the session, is that information security or system security handles about or mediates around availability, confidentiality, and integrity of information and systems. So a loss of information or system security is perceived as a loss of availability, confidentiality, or integrity of information. Now, what are the underlying values here? Because there is, of course, a very pragmatic rationale here. A loss of information security can be perceived as an economic rationale. And both in the e-signatures regulation proposal, in the draft directive on cyber attacks against information systems, this economic rationale really prevails. And that's also a bit logical, because that's, of course, a raison d'etre for the economic union we are in. But there's also a very normative, a normative framework underlying in this triad of information security. Availability is very much about the freedom of communication, for example. Integrity is very much about what the Germans call informationelle Selbstbestimmung, so that nobody impersonates you, or non-authorized users don't impersonate as you. And confidentiality is, of course, about privacy and communication secrecy. And various stakeholders may take very different have very different ideas about what information or cybersecurity actually entails. And the ultimate task for the EU regulator, or for any regulator, is to make this normative assessment. And that's a very political thing, of course. But it needs to apprise both these pragmatic and very legitimate underlying values of information security, but also the normative ones. A very sort of example to make this very clear is a couple of months ago with some colleagues we launched a report on cloud computing and surveillance, and we focused on surveillance of the United States of EU citizens. Now, the Patriot Act has dominated this discussion, and there has been considerable attention to this. But what actually is the most interesting paragraph in this US regulatory framework is the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. There will be a great panel on this on Friday, hosted by Casper Bowden, who was one of the first in Europe actually to raise this issue and put it on the agenda. But my question is this cloud computing loophole that we are witnessing, is that a cybersecurity problem? And that is something that the regulator should address. So if we're talking about cybersecurity, do we also talk about mass surveillance that is going on, or that may be going on transatlantically or between nation states. And there's a host of other problems as well, but this was just an example. So I'll leave you with that thought. With the thought that the statement of the President of Estonia that the state is the ultimate guarantor of your online freedoms. Now, the fundamental right to communication secrecy and privacy were, of course, rooted in the idea that the state is not. I mean, the state may have a positive obligation, of course, but fundamental rights are there to protect citizens against a range of actors. So conceptually, it will be a challenge for us, and I think that is the very most urgent challenge of today, is to think of what is cybersecurity and how do we balance these very pragmatic and normative claims that are part of this concept. I thank you, and I'm very much open for debate, and if anyone is interested in the actor-based value chain approach, which I think is a very informative way for regulating all these problems that are surrounding cybersecurity, I will be here for the next coming days. Thank you very much.